Now that we have your connection up and working, and let me tell you, if you don't have it up and working, there's no reason to continue because you're not going to make the rest of it work. We can get to the point of accessing a database. So we're going to start with the connection, and from that we need to get a statement. Control space out here. And the statement, again, java.sql is vitally important here. If you get the wrong statement here, if you pull in the MySQL statement, it's not going to work. It's not going to compile. It's not going to be nice. Oh, not new. We go to the connection, and we get from that a statement. Now notice there's a number of different ways I can create a statement. We don't need any of the fancy stuff. There's a lot of stuff here for you to explore and understand beyond that. You can do callable statements. You can do prepared statements. We're just going to use basic straight-up statements. These other ones are for performance purposes, and there's a lot of good and bad reasons to use them depending on the database you're working with, the driver you're working with, a bunch of stuff. We're not worried about any of that now. We're just worried about the basics of connecting to a database. So now that we have a statement, let's get some data out of this. So we need to get a result set back. There you go, results, result set. There you go, java.sql.resultSet. Statement.execute query. We want to get data back. That's the only one here that returns back a result set. And so we can do something very simple inside of here. Select star from product. This might be familiar because that's exactly the query we did when we were setting up the database, something we were able to do on the other side. If I'm not sure if my SQL is right, I can copy this. So I can go and copy this exactly. I can go back to my command line. I pull up a command line here, and I'm going to pull that back over here, and I can paste it right back into here. Select. Oops, I'm sorry. I got to connect to my database first. My SQL -u root -p test. I have to connect to sales. Got to tell what database I'm working with, and then I can paste it inside of here. Now, in the command line, I have to put a semicolon at the end of it. There you go. You can see it works. If I did something wrong, product, spelled it wrong, it would give me an error. Table does not exist. But there we can see that it works. It's ready to go. Notice here I do not have to put the semicolon after it because it's executing it already. In the command line tool, I'm a human typing stuff in. I have to know when I'm done. But here it does it right there. Now notice I've added 2 lines of code here. That's all. I'm going to go ahead and run it again. I want to make sure it's constantly in a good, happy state. I run it, build successful, it's happy. Again, if I typed product wrong, did something wrong in my query, I get an exception. MySQL syntax error exception. Table sales does not exist. Very simple. It's going to give you hopefully very useful things. If I say select Bob from product, and I go and run this, it's going to give me a different error. Unknown column Bob. What's happening is JDBC is taking the error that's resulting on the database and translating it back to me in my Java application as an exception so I can do something useful with it. But if I do this, I'm getting everything back in the result set. I'm just not doing anything with it yet. So how do I work with the result set? Now we refer to this in the lecture side of it. Let's see it in action now. So I'm sorry. Before I go there, results dot. Let's show you the results here. So you can see there's a number of methods inside of here. I can go before the first row. I can close it. I can delete rows. All sorts of things I can do with my result set. I can do all the get stuff that we saw inside of there. What we want to get to the first row. Now before first can kick it back up to the first row, but that's arrived through the next word, the next view here. Notice next returns true and false. It doesn't return back to me a row. I have no way of representing the row as a whole. I just go one row at a time. So I say results.next. I can do a for loop, I can do a while loop here. I'm actually going to switch to a while loop because it is a little bit simpler syntax inside of here. So while results.next. Let's keep it ridiculously simple here. Just before we get anything else. System.out.println x. Let's see how many rows we're getting back when we do this. We get 3 x's. Why? because when we did the same query over there, we got 3 rows. All right. So let's do something a bit more interesting than this. Results dot get string, because we can get anything as a string for number 1. Whatever the first column is inside of there, let's get that. 1, 2, 3. Why? Column 1 is the ID. We got 1, 2, 3. If I would have said here instead, column 2, it returned lightsaber, speeder, Death Star. Anything can be returned back as a string. The ID is a number. It can be returned back as string. I can also do it by name. The last column out here is price. If I say return price, you notice it returning back the string as a price. It's not giving me the exact numbers out there. See, there's a little bit of some fuzziness that, depending on how you store values out there. If you store them as floating point numbers, there's some fuzziness that shows up here. So 98.44. Why is the 44 there? That's some number modeling stuff that's beyond our scope here. Let me point out, if I do something that's not out there, so we have product, which is tax. Let's go ask for the tax on that. When I run this, I got an exception again. Column tax not found. It's because I don't have that in my data set. So this is hopefully going to give you some good information if you're making mistakes, what's going on right away. So are we going to take things and print them out? Probably not. Totally, what we're going to do most likely is get them and put them in variables. So I can do int id is equal to results dot get int id. I can say string name equal to results dot get string name. This goes straight down our database. And if you remember the structure of the database, you might have to go back to it. ID, name, description, price. That's exactly what we're going to do here. String description is equal to results dot get string description. Now, why are we naming everything exactly the same? Well, probably because it was named well to begin with. We don't have to name it the same. We could call it, the final one, we can call it a double. We could, if we don't like the word price, we can say retail price. Let's say that's more descriptive towards our model. That's totally fine. Results.get double. But we have to name this price. It's got to match what's in the database coming back, what that query was stating it was going to be called. So now it runs, it doesn't do anything. I haven't done anything with these and I'm printing them out. But you can see I'm getting each one of these as their native price inside of here. Let's say I said get ID up there for name, where it's obviously not a number. At that point, I would get an exception again. Invalid value for get int lightsaber. So obviously I did the wrong thing inside of here. I don't want to say it's foolproof, but it certainly is going to have a lot of checks inside of there to try and make sure you have good things going on. All right, so really, now that I've got these guys, what I really want to do with this stuff, as I read it in one row at a time, isn't even just store it in variables, because all of these things relate to something. What does it relate to? Well, it relates to a new Java class that represents whatever that table represents, most likely, a product. A good database design and a good Java object model design are probably going to be almost exactly the same, if not exactly the same. So I can go through from my product here, and I can actually cheat a little bit. These guys I grabbed, I'm going to cheat and make these into my attributes here. Obviously, I don't need this bit of code, but I don't have to retype each of these all over again. All right, so make all these private. Oops. And now I have the start of a Java class. I'm going to use my tools in NetBeans, Alt-Enter. I can create either constructors or getters and setters, whichever way I want to do it. I definitely am going to need getters and setters, so I'm going to create all those. I'm going to go ahead and bomb down here, Alt-Insert, and create a toString, because I might need that later on, that prints out everything. At least I have it. And now I have a way of representing each row from a database as an object of its own. So I get these guys. I can now create a product. P is equal to new product. P.set ID is equal to ID. P.set name is equal to name. P.set description, there's the description. P.set price, retail price, is equal to retail price. And then just to make sure it's all working, system.out.println P. So as we run this, we can see I'm all of a sudden in a handful of lines of code. It's got to be carefully crafted, but not logically difficult lines of code. Able to go from connecting to a database, creating a statement, taking that statement and applying to that a SQL query. Taking the results from that SQL query one row at a time, and then for each column that is representing that row, grabbing the data, throwing it in an object of its own, and then we figure out what to do with it from there. But this is a basic query for data. So go off and try this. Use the two columns. You need to do this eventually for both product and customer. So go off and get this working at least, if not both of them working, and then we'll go from there.